A corroded lump of bronze held the world's oldest computer. For centuries, we believed our technological story was a straight line from primitive tools to modern marvels, but that story is wrong. This journey uncovers 25 ancient technologies rediscovered by modern science that prove our ancestors achieved the impossible. You will see how concrete can heal itself, how civilizations built complex machinery without electricity, and how these breakthroughs are reshaping our own future. We will unravel the mystery of a fire that burned on water and examine a crystal that guided ships across trackless oceans. What do you think it means to be truly advanced? That corroded lump was first catalogued as a piece of meaningless wreckage, a curiosity from the deep. It took over half a century for anyone to even suspect its true nature. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, was a box of secrets. On the outside, perhaps a simple wooden case with dials, but inside, a miniature bronze universe of at least 30 interlocking gears, some with teeth finer than a grain of rice. It was not a tool for navigation in the simple sense. It was a cosmic calculator. By turning a hand crank, an ancient scholar could see the predicted positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets. It could forecast eclipses not as omens, but as predictable celestial events. It even accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon with a clever pin and slot mechanism, a feature of mechanical engineering not seen again for over 1,000 years. This was not magic, it was mathematics made metal. The genius behind this device implies a lost lineage of technical thought, a school of mechanics whose other creations may have vanished into history, melted down for their bronze, or lost to the silent decay of time. The mechanism forces a humbling question upon us. If this one artifact survived by the sheer chance of a shipwreck, what breathtaking inventions have we lost forever? Our next discovery suggests that for some ancient builders, even the passage of millennia was not a permanent threat. While the Antikythera Mechanism was a masterpiece of precision, the Romans built for eternity on a monumental scale. Their greatest architectural triumphs were not delicate machines but massive, enduring public works. The Pantheon in Rome is a perfect example. Its vast, unsupported concrete dome has sheltered generations for nearly 2,000 years. It has weathered earthquakes, invasions, and the relentless passage of time. Modern engineers look upon it with a mixture of awe and professional bewilderment. Why? Because our own concrete, reinforced with steel, often shows significant decay in just 50 years. Saltwater rusts the rebar, causing the concrete to crack and spoil. So what secret did the Romans possess that we lost? For centuries, historians assumed their concrete was simply a primitive, if lucky, version of our own. Modern science has revealed a stunning truth. Their concrete was not just different, it was smarter. The Roman formula was deceptively simple. They mixed lime with volcanic ash, a material called pozzolana, and then they added a surprising ingredient, seawater. When this mixture was poured, a complex chemical reaction began, one that never truly stops. If a tiny crack forms in this ancient concrete, allowing more moisture to seep inside, something remarkable happens. The water reacts with the leftover volcanic material and lime, triggering the growth of new, strong mineral crystals. These crystals fill the crack, literally healing the wound. The material repairs itself. For decades, this was just a theory. Then, researchers began taking core samples from 2,000-year-old Roman piers and breakwaters, structures that had been submerged in the corrosive Mediterranean Sea since the day they were built. Instead of being eroded to rubble, the concrete was in phenomenal condition. Laboratory analysis showed it was actually stronger in places, with a labyrinth of interlocking mineral growths that blocked further cracks. The seawater, the very element that destroys our modern ports, was the key ingredient that gave Roman concrete its longevity. Today, material scientists are racing to reverse engineer this ancient wisdom. The goal is not to copy the recipe exactly, but to understand the principle. They are developing new types of concrete that contain special capsules of healing agents or bacteria that produce limestone when exposed to water. The potential is staggering. Imagine bridges, tunnels, and seawalls that maintain themselves, drastically reducing repair costs, traffic disruptions, and material waste. Furthermore, the Roman process was far less energy-intensive than producing modern Portland cement, which requires extremely high temperatures and is a major source of global carbon emissions. So this ancient technology offers a dual gift: unparalleled durability and a gentler footprint on our planet. It forces us to reconsider a very modern arrogance. We assumed that newer always meant better, but what if the most sustainable blueprint for our future was written in stone and ash 2 millennia ago? What other forgotten formulas for harmony with our environment are waiting, silent, in the ruins of past civilizations? That self-healing concrete was a triumph of chemistry, a material in harmony with the elements. But for another legendary technology, the goal was not harmony, but dominance on the battlefield. The story moves from the slow patience of architecture to the swift, decisive art of the swordsmith. Picture a crusader knight on a sun-baked plain, his own finely crafted European blade raised in a desperate parry. It meets another sword, this one with a mesmerizing, watery pattern swirling across its dark surface. With a terrible crack, the knight's weapon shatters while the patterned blade remains unbroken, its edge lethally sharp. This was the reputation of Damascus steel, a metal so famed for its flexibility, its ability to hold a razor's edge, and its incredible durability that it passed from history into myth. Its secret died with the master smith sometime in the 18th century. For generations, the method of forging these legendary blades was considered a permanent loss, a peak of metallurgical art that modern science could not reclaim. The starting material was known, a type of ultra-high carbon steel called woots, produced in India. But simply having the recipe for the cake is not the same as knowing how to bake it. The precise alchemy of heat, hammer, and cool that transformed that lump of iron into a sword of legend remained a mystery. Modern metallurgists, armed with tools the ancient smiths could never have dreamed of, finally unraveled the secret. They took slivers of authentic Damascus blades and placed them under electron microscopes, peering into the atomic structure of the metal. What they found was astonishing. Embedded within the steel were carbon nanotubes and nanowires, structures so tiny they are measured in billionths of a meter. This was nanotechnology, achieved in a blacksmith's forge centuries before the word was even invented. These microscopic structures formed during a very specific, carefully controlled process of repeated forging, folding, and a slow cooling cycle. Trace elements in the original Indian ore, like vanadium, acted as catalysts, guiding the carbon into these incredibly strong, reinforcing shapes. The iconic watery pattern was not just decoration, it was a map of this internal crystalline forest, a visible signature of its nano-scale strength. This discovery did more than solve a historical puzzle. It opened a new door for modern materials science. Today, researchers are studying the principles behind Damascus steel to design the next generation of advanced alloys. The goal is to intentionally engineer similar nanostructures into metals, creating materials that are simultaneously stronger, lighter, and more resistant to stress for use in everything from aerospace to medical implants. This raises a profound and almost mystical question. The ancient smiths had no concept of molecules, let alone nanotubes. They worked by feel, by tradition, by observing the color of the metal in the fire and the sound of the hammer. Their process was an art form refined over generations through trial and error. Yet, through this art, they accidentally engineered a material at the molecular level. How many other secrets of the physical world were discovered not through calculation, but through centuries of dedicated, hands-on craftsmanship, secrets that we, with all our instruments, are only now beginning to perceive. If concrete could heal and steel could be woven at the nanoscale, what other impossible materials did the ancient world possess? Our next discovery suggests that for some, the very air could be commanded to carry sound across impossible distances. The mastery of metal and stone gave civilizations strength and permanence, but survival often demanded a more immediate, terrifying power. For the Byzantine Empire, the ultimate guarantee of its survival was a weapon so dreadful its very existence became a legend. Enemy sailors spoke of it with a hushed, superstitious fear. They described a liquid hellfire that poured from the prows of Byzantine warships, a flame that raced across the waves, clinging to wood and flesh, a fire that water itself could not quench. This was Greek fire, and for centuries it was the unmatched superweapon of the medieval world. The secret of its creation was guarded with a paranoia that makes modern state secrets look casual. Only a handful of families, it is said, knew the full formula, and they passed it down from father to son within the walls of Constantinople. The emperors understood that the recipe itself was more valuable than any single fleet. This obsessive secrecy worked too well. When Constantinople finally fell in the 15th century, the knowledge vanished with its last guardians, leaving behind only terrifying accounts and a profound historical mystery. So what was this infernal substance? Modern chemical historians, acting as forensic detectives, have pieced together a likely formula from contemporary descriptions and the materials available at the time. The base was almost certainly a form of distilled petroleum, similar to modern naphtha or crude oil. To this, they likely added pine resin, which made the mixture sticky so it would adhere to ships and sailors. But the most ingenious component may have been quicklime. Quicklime is a powder that undergoes a violent chemical reaction when it contacts water, generating intense heat. This means the mixture could have been sprayed as a liquid, and the moment it hit the seawater or the damp hull of an enemy ship, it would self-ignite in a terrifying, sudden burst. The delivery system was as innovative as the fuel itself. The Byzantines used bronze tubes mounted on their ships, connected to pumps and pressurized tanks. Operators would heat the mixture in a sealed cauldron, build pressure with a pump, and then open a valve, projecting a roaring stream of liquid fire dozens of feet across the water. These were, in essence, the direct precursors to the modern flamethrower. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage. Imagine the horror of a sailor seeing fire, the oldest and most feared enemy of any wooden vessel, not just on the water but of the water, chasing his ship relentlessly. It is no exaggeration to say Greek fire saved the Byzantine Empire and arguably Christian Europe on multiple occasions, most famously during the Arab sieges of Constantinople. Its rediscovery in principle forces us to confront a complex legacy. Here was a profound understanding of chemistry and pressurized mechanics, a technological leap born not from a desire to explore or build, but from the desperate need to defend and destroy. It highlights a sobering truth that some of humanity's most rapid and ingenious leaps forward are driven by conflict. The loss of the exact formula stands as a permanent warning. When knowledge is hoarded too absolutely, when it is bound to a single city or a single family line, it can be extinguished in a moment, leaving future generations to puzzle over the ashes of a forgotten miracle. What other revolutionary ideas, born from that same desperate spark of wartime innovation, have we lost to the silence of fallen empires? If fire could be tamed to rule the sea, could ancient engineers also command the very light of the sun? The terrifying power of Greek fire was a secret born from conflict, a chemical weapon designed for one overwhelming purpose. But what if another ancient artifact hints at a technology born from curiosity, a quiet experiment with a force no one could even see? In 1936, during excavations near Baghdad, workers uncovered a tomb from the Parthian era, a civilization that flourished over 2,000 years ago. Among the typical pottery and ornaments was a most peculiar object. It was a simple clay jar about the size of a man's fist. Inside, a rolled copper cylinder was fixed in place with asphalt. Suspended in the center of that cylinder was an iron rod. The asphalt formed a tight seal at the top, holding the rod perfectly in place without touching the copper walls. To the archaeologists who found it, this configuration was baffling. It looked like nothing they had seen before, but to a modern electrical engineer, the design is instantly, eerily familiar. This is the basic blueprint for a galvanic cell, a simple battery. The theory is straightforward. If you filled that jar with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or citrus juice or even wine, a chemical reaction would begin. The acidic electrolyte would react with the two different metals, the iron and the copper, causing electrons to flow from one to the other through the liquid. Connect a wire between the iron rod and the copper cylinder, and you would have a small, continuous electric current. Experiments with replicas have proven it works, generating just under 1 volt of electricity. That is about 2/3 the power of a modern triple-A battery, a tiny but measurable spark from antiquity. So what was it for? This is where history becomes a fascinating debate. The most compelling practical theory involves a craft the Parthians and later Sasanians were known for: fine metalwork and gilding. 1 volt of electricity is precisely what is needed for a process called electroplating, where a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, is transferred onto a cheaper object like silver using an electric current. An artisan could have connected several of these jars together to increase the voltage, creating a small battery bank capable of depositing a flawless, even layer of gold onto a statue or a piece of jewelry. This would have been a far more efficient and controlled method than the traditional, messy approach of using mercury. Other scholars are skeptical, suggesting the jar was simply a secure storage container for sacred scrolls, with the iron rod acting as a core for a rolled parchment. Yet the airtight asphalt seal and the specific choice of metals make the battery explanation stubbornly plausible. The true purpose may never be known for certain, and that uncertainty is the artifact's greatest power. It forces us to confront a tantalizing possibility. We have always framed the discovery of electricity as a modern saga, a story that begins with Benjamin Franklin's kite and progresses to Edison's light bulb. But what if that story has a forgotten prologue? What if, in workshops 2 millennia ago, craftsmen were experimenting with the fundamental principles of electrochemistry, not as a science but as a practical craft secret? The Baghdad Battery, whether it was used for plating or for something else entirely, stands as a quiet, physical question mark. It suggests that the spark of discovery can flicker in unexpected places, not always in the grand libraries of Alexandria, but sometimes in the humble workshop of a metalsmith, a curiosity that could generate a current but not enough to illuminate its own true story. If a simple jar could hold an electric charge, what other invisible forces might ancient cultures have sensed and sought to harness in ways we are only beginning to understand? The Baghdad Battery hints at a quiet mastery of unseen forces, but for the Norse, survival demanded reading the sky itself. A Viking saga describes a scene of desperate navigation. The legendary King Olaf, caught in a thick fog on the open sea, needs to know the sun's position to set his course. He asks for a mysterious tool, a solarstein, a sunstone. Holding it aloft, he rotates the crystal until a specific point, then confidently points to where the hidden sun must be. For centuries, this was dismissed as poetic myth, a magical artifact from the Age of Heroes. Modern physics and a single, stunning archaeological find have transformed that myth into plausible history. The key is a natural property called birefringence, found in certain clear crystals like Iceland spar, a form of calcite. When light passes through such a crystal, it splits into two separate beams. The sky, even when overcast, emits polarized light, meaning its light waves vibrate in a specific direction that circles around the position of the sun. By looking through a sunstone and rotating it, a skilled navigator would see two overlapping images of the sky. At the exact orientation where those two images match in brightness, the crystal reveals the polarization pattern, effectively pointing an arrow toward the sun, even if it is completely obscured by cloud or fog. This was not magic, it was an ingenious application of optical physics. The theoretical proof came from laboratory experiments, but the tangible evidence arrived with the wreck of a British warship from the 1590s. Among the navigator's tools, archaeologists found a clear, rectangular block of Iceland spar. Its edges were worn smooth from handling, and its location suggested it was a vital part of the ship's kit, a practical tool used centuries after the Viking Age. This discovery bridged the gap between saga and science. It proved that the principle was not only understood, but was in practical use for oceanic navigation long before the magnetic compass became reliable in the stormy, high-latitude waters of the North Atlantic. With this sunstone and their profound knowledge of seabirds, wave patterns, and stars, the Vikings possessed a redundant, sophisticated navigation system. It allowed them to venture across the trackless gray expanse of the North Atlantic, reaching Iceland, Greenland, and the shores of North America with a confidence that seems almost supernatural to us. They were not just brave sailors, they were masterful interpreters of the natural world, using a piece of the earth to read the secrets of the sky. This raises a humbling thought about technological progress. We often define advancement by the complexity of the tools we build from scratch, but the Vikings remind us that another form of genius lies in perceptive observation, in learning to use the subtle gifts the planet already provides. How many other cultures developed equally elegant, invisible technologies, not by forging metal or mixing chemicals, but by learning to see the world in a way we have forgotten? If a crystal could reveal the hidden sun, could an entire city be designed to function like a perfect, living machine? The Norse sunstone turned the sky itself into a compass, but high in the Andes, an empire managed its vast domain with a language written not in ink, but in knots. In the storerooms of Inca administrators, hands moved with practiced speed, tying intricate patterns into hanging cords of cotton and llama wool. To the conquering Spanish, these objects were curious artifacts, perhaps ceremonial items or simple memory aids for primitive people. They called them quipus, the Quechua word for knot. In their dismissal, an entire system of record-keeping was nearly lost to history. Modern scholars, however, have begun to untangle a truth that rewrites our understanding of communication. The Quipu was not a simple tally. It was a sophisticated, three-dimensional database, a physical ledger of an entire empire's complexity. Each Quipu was a masterwork of information design. A main horizontal cord served as the backbone from which dozens, sometimes hundreds of pendant cords were suspended. The variables were precise and meaningful. The type of knot, whether a figure 8 or a long knot with a specific number of turns, denoted numbers in a base 10 positional system, much like our own digits. The placement of a knot on its cord indicated its order of magnitude, units, tens, hundreds, but the data went far beyond arithmetic. The color of the cord, derived from natural dyes, could represent a specific commodity like corn, potatoes, or wool. The spin and ply direction of the thread, whether twisted to the left or the right, might signify a category, perhaps a geographical region or a social class. Some researchers believe certain knot combinations could even encode phonetic sounds or logograms, moving beyond pure accounting into the realm of narrative history and lore. This was a binary code crafted in fiber, a tactile and portable information technology perfectly suited to an empire without a traditional script, connected by a monumental network of roads and relay runners. A Quipu could record census data, tax obligations, military organization, and astronomical cycles, all in a format that was durable, verifiable, and could be read by trained specialists known as Quipucamayaks. The system was so effective that Spanish colonial authorities reportedly used quipus for local accounting decades after the conquest. The rediscovery of its logic forces a profound challenge to a long-held bias. We have historically equated civilization with textual writing, with alphabets etched in stone or scribed on parchment. The Inca achievement demonstrates that writing is not about the medium, but about the reliable encoding of information. They developed a system of profound elegance and utility, one that organized a vast and rugged territory without a single decipherable page. Yet, for all we now understand about its numerical and categorical language, the full story the quipus tell remains partially locked. Scholars can read the numbers and the inventories, but the potential for deeper narratives, for myths, poems, or histories encoded in knot sequences, still eludes complete translation. This lingering mystery echoes a broader question that haunts archaeologists and linguists. What other non-textual systems of record-keeping are we still struggling to decipher? From the undeciphered symbols of the Indus Valley civilization to the patterned tattoos on ancient mummies, how many voices from the past are speaking to us in languages we have not yet learned to hear? If an empire could speak through knots, what profound conversations might be woven into other artifacts we have yet to fully understand? A society that could record its history in knots understood the vital importance of anticipating disaster. In the year 132, within the court of China's Han Dynasty, a court official named Zhang Heng unveiled a device that seemed to border on divination. It was a large, ornate bronze urn standing over 6 feet tall. Encircling its upper section were 8 dragons, each facing a cardinal or intercardinal direction. Crouched below each dragon was a bronze toad, its mouth open in anticipation. The purpose of this magnificent sculpture was terrifyingly practical. When an earthquake struck somewhere in the empire, even hundreds of miles away, one of the dragons would activate. Its jaw would clatter open, and a heavy bronze ball would drop from its mouth directly into the waiting maw of the toad below. The loud clang would alert the court, and the specific dragon that released its ball would indicate the direction of the distant tremor. To the assembled officials, it must have seemed like magic, a vessel that could feel the groaning of the earth itself. For centuries, later scholars dismissed it as a legend, a fanciful story from an ancient text. How could a mechanical device without any electronic sensors or wires possibly detect a quake so far beyond the horizon of human perception? The answer lies in a brilliant application of basic physics. Modern reconstructions based on meticulous study of the historical descriptions suggest a beautifully simple principle inside that ornate shell. At the heart of the urn, carefully balanced, was a heavy inverted pendulum. Think of a large weight suspended from the top, like a plumb bob, but free to swing in any direction. Around this central pendulum, 8 cleverly crafted levers were arranged, each connected to one of the dragon heads on the exterior. The system was delicately tuned. When seismic waves from a distant earthquake finally rippled through the ground to the capital, they would cause the entire urn to shudder. But the heavy pendulum inside, due to inertia, would tend to stay still. This relative motion would cause the pendulum to swing, but only ever so slightly. The genius was in the levers. They were designed to be exquisitely sensitive. The slight swing of the pendulum would bump against just one of the 8 internal arms. That nudge would trigger a mechanism, likely a latch or a simple lever, causing the corresponding dragon's mouth to open and release its ball. The design even accounted for aftershocks or minor tremors, as the ball once released could not be easily reset, providing a clear, unambiguous signal. The exact internal configuration remains a topic of scholarly debate, as the original device was lost to history. Some engineers propose a system of curved rails or a central column that would roll into a lever. But the core concept is universally acknowledged as not only plausible but profoundly advanced. Zhang Heng's seismoscope did not measure the magnitude of a quake as modern instruments do, but its directional detection was a monumental leap. It proved that the vibrations of the Earth could be mechanically amplified and interpreted, turning an invisible force into a visible, actionable warning. Historical records state the device once indicated an earthquake to the west when no one in the capital felt a thing. Days later, a messenger arrived from a province hundreds of miles away confirming a major tremor had struck in that exact direction. This was not a lucky guess, it was empirical validation. For a government ruling a vast territory, such early warning was invaluable, allowing for swifter dispatch of aid and assessment of damage. This single artifact redefines our timeline of instrumentation. It means that the science of detecting and analyzing seismic waves, which we call seismology, did not begin in the 19th century with the invention of the electromagnetic seismograph. It began in a Chinese workshop in the 2nd century with bronze, artistry, and a deep understanding of balance and motion. It challenges a persistent myth that ancient technology was solely about brute force or simple mechanics. Here was a device of delicate sensitivity, a machine designed to listen to the whisper of the planet itself. If a bronze urn could feel a distant earthquake, what other subtle signals from the natural world did ancient innovators learn to translate long before our electronic ears were there to hear them? Zhang Heng's seismoscope listened to the whispers of the earth, but another legendary mind sought to harness a far more volatile force. During the brutal Roman siege of Syracuse in the 3rd century before the Common Era, the city's greatest defender was not a general, but an elderly mathematician and inventor named Archimedes. Ancient historians, writing centuries after the events, credited him with devising fantastical war machines to repel the invading fleet, giant cranes that could pluck ships from the water and mirrors that focused sunlight to set them ablaze. Among these tales is one of the most intriguing, a weapon that seems to leap from the pages of a later era. They described a bronze tube heated until it glowed, into which a small amount of water was introduced. In an instant, the water would flash into steam, and with a thunderous roar, it would hurl a heavy stone ball toward the enemy. This was the alleged steam cannon of Archimedes, a device that would not find a detailed design sketch again for over 1700 years in the notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci. For modern historians, it sits in a frustrating gray area, a compelling idea without a single shred of archaeological proof. No bronze tube has ever been found in the ruins of Syracuse. This absence has led many to dismiss it as pure legend, a dramatic embellishment added to the myth of a genius, but a fascinating question remains, setting aside whether Archimedes actually built it, could he have? Is the physics behind such a weapon even possible with the materials and knowledge of his time? To answer that, modern engineers have moved from the library to the workshop. They have constructed simple replicas based on the ancient descriptions, using period-appropriate materials like iron or bronze. The principle is brutally straightforward. A sealed tube is heated strongly at one end. A projectile, such as a stone ball wrapped in a leather seal, is inserted. A small amount of water is then introduced behind it, often through a small port. The intense heat of the metal causes the water to vaporize almost instantly, creating a sudden, massive increase in pressure inside the sealed chamber. That pressure has only one way to go, propelling the projectile down the barrel and out with tremendous force. Tests have shown that such a device is not only feasible, it is effective. A simple steam cannon can launch a kilogram stone ball with enough energy to shatter timber or dent metal at a significant distance. The roar and the cloud of steam would have been terrifyingly dramatic in battle. This experimental archaeology does not prove Archimedes built a steam cannon, but it does prove something perhaps more profound. It demonstrates that the core principles of thermodynamics and pressurized propulsion were within the grasp of an inventive mind in the ancient world. The conversion of heat to mechanical work, the explosive power of phase change from liquid to gas, these were not secrets waiting for the Industrial Revolution to be discovered. They were observable phenomena: a boiling pot lid rattling from steam, the geysers of hot springs. These were everyday clues. Archimedes, a man who famously understood displacement and levers, was precisely the kind of thinker who could look at a boiling pot and see a potential engine of war. The steam cannon, therefore, exists in a fascinating limbo between myth and latent technology. It represents an idea whose time had not yet come for widespread application, likely because it was dangerous, unpredictable, and required immense resources for a single, volatile shot compared to the reliable power of torsion catapults. Yet its theoretical viability blurs a line we often draw too sharply. It suggests that many so-called myths of ancient technology might not be pure fiction, but rather exaggerated accounts of real, experimental, or one-off inventions that were lost because they were too advanced for their logistical context or too secret to survive their creator. So we are left with a haunting speculative thread. If the steam cannon was conceivable, what other legendary devices from lost texts or fragmented histories might also have had a basis in forgotten physics? Could the stories of automatic doors in temples or animated statues have sprung from observations of hydraulics, pneumatics, or simple chemistry that we are only now relearning to see through ancient eyes? The steam cannon represented a volatile flash of potential, but true architectural resilience often comes from a quieter, more patient chemistry. Deep in the humid embrace of the Mexican jungle, the temples of the ancient Maya city of Palenque rise from the mist. What is immediately striking is not just their grandeur, but their endurance. While the jungle reclaims everything, many of Palenque's plastered surfaces and decorative stucco reliefs have survived for over 1,000 years, resisting the relentless assault of torrential rains, mold, and encroaching roots. For decades, scientists assumed this was simply a fortunate accident of geology. Modern analysis has revealed a deliberate, sustainable genius. The Maya did not just use limestone plaster. They transformed it into a kind of ancient bioconcrete. Their secret ingredient was not volcanic ash, but the organic bounty of the forest itself. They mixed their lime plaster with the sap of local trees, particularly from the chucum and geote trees. When this organic resin was combined with the burned limestone, a fascinating chemical marriage took place. The organic compounds interacted with the calcium carbonate on a molecular level, creating a network of long, flexible chains within the rigid mineral matrix. The result was a plaster that was more than just hard. It was incredibly durable and, most importantly, water-resistant. It could flex slightly without cracking and actively repel the moisture that would normally seep in and cause erosion. This was a material engineered for its specific environment, born from a deep understanding of local resources. But the Maya innovation went even further. This bioconcrete did something remarkable as it aged. The organic components, through natural processes, could actually help capture atmospheric carbon dioxide, slowly converting it back into stable limestone. In a sense, the buildings were not just sitting in the jungle, they were participating in it, breathing with it in a cycle that strengthened them over time. This stands in stark contrast to our modern concrete, which releases vast amounts of carbon during its production. Today, material scientists are looking intently at this ancient formula. The goal is not to copy it exactly, but to understand its principles of sustainability and resilience. researchers are experimenting with modern bioconcretes that incorporate plant-based polymers or even specially selected bacteria. The vision is to create building materials that are not just strong, but are carbon negative, pulling more greenhouse gases from the atmosphere than they emit during creation. The lesson from Palink is profound. It challenges the modern assumption that advanced materials must be synthetic and divorced from nature. The Maya saw the forest not as an obstacle to be cleared, but as a partner and a pharmacy for their architecture. Their technology was a dialogue with their ecosystem, not a declaration of war against it. This raises a quiet, urgent question for our own time. In our rush toward high-tech solutions, how many other elegant, locally sourced, and inherently sustainable material secrets have we overlooked? Secrets that were not lost, but simply forgotten because they spoke the language of balance rather than dominance. The Maya bioconcrete was a dialogue with the living world, but another civilization perfected a medium meant to speak across millennia. On a fragile sheet of papyrus, the stark black lines of Egyptian hieroglyphs remain as vivid and defiant today as the day they were painted 3,000 years ago. In a quiet library, you could place this ancient text beside a medieval European manuscript, and the contrast would be startling. The medieval ink, often iron gall, has often browned, eaten through the parchment, or faded to a ghostly sepia. The Egyptian script, however, looks freshly applied, its darkness absolute. For centuries, this was simply accepted as a fortunate property of soot-based ink. Modern science, using tools like particle accelerators to generate intense synchrotron radiation, has scanned these ancient texts at a molecular level, revealing a lost art of incredible sophistication. The Egyptians were not just using carbon black, which is essentially soot. They were formulating a complex chemical cocktail. Analysis of inks from papyri dating back to the Roman period in Egypt shows they consistently mixed their carbon pigment with additives like copper, lead, and sometimes even iron. At first glance, this seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't metals corrode and damage the papyrus? The opposite proved true. These elements were present in trace amounts, acting as stabilizers and binding agents. The copper compounds, for instance, may have helped the carbon particles adhere more firmly to the fibrous papyrus surface, preventing the flaking or rubbing off that plagues simple charcoal inks. The lead components likely formed protective complexes that shielded the carbon from oxidative breakdown, the very process that causes fading. This was not a haphazard recipe. It was a standardized, reproducible technology employed by scribes for centuries, ensuring that administrative records, literary works, and sacred spells would endure. The knowledge of this formulation was lost with the decline of the pharaonic scribble tradition. For hundreds of years, later cultures struggled with inks that were acidic, unstable, or prone to fading, a loss that directly impacted the preservation of knowledge from the Middle Ages. The rediscovery of the Egyptian formula through 21st century analytical techniques is now revolutionizing two fields. For conservators, it provides a blueprint for understanding the materials they are trying to preserve, allowing for more precise and gentle restoration methods. For chemists, it inspires the development of new, high-performance archival inks for museums and national archives, inks designed to last for centuries without degrading the paper they are written on. This revelation turns a mundane object, a pot of black ink, into a profound statement. It tells us that the ancient Egyptian scribe, dipping his reed pen, was wielding a tool born from deliberate, advanced chemical understanding. The permanence of their words was not an accident. It was an engineering requirement for a civilization obsessed with eternity. It forces us to look at our own everyday objects with new suspicion. What seemingly simple items in our own world, the glue in a book binding, the coating on a photograph, the alloy in a door handle, contain hidden layers of material science so advanced that future archaeologists might marvel at our own lost wisdom. The desire for permanence drove both the scribe's ink and the architect's plans, but in the scorching heart of the Persian desert, survival demanded not endurance, but a miraculous defiance of nature itself. There, rising from the sand like strange, conical beehives, stood the Yakhchal, an ancient ice house. The name itself means ice pit, but that humble label belies its astonishing achievement. In a landscape where summer temperatures could soar past 120 degrees Fahrenheit, these structures did not merely store ice, they could actually manufacture it during the coldest nights of winter, preserving it deep into the blazing summer months. This was not refrigeration powered by electricity or complex machinery. It was a masterpiece of passive thermodynamics, a building designed as a thermal machine. The design was elegantly holistic. At its base lay a deep, subterranean storage chamber, often reaching down 30 feet or more into the cooler earth. Above this rose a massive domed superstructure made of a special mortar called sarouj, a mixture of clay, sand, ash, and egg whites that dried into a superb insulator. The exterior was often coated in a gleaming white plaster to reflect the sun's brutal rays. But the true genius lay in the integration of other Persian technologies. Wind catchers, those iconic towers that captured even the faintest breeze, would funnel cool night air down into the depths of the storage pit. Meanwhile, water was brought from distant mountains through underground aqueducts known as kanats. This water was channeled into shallow, shaded basins adjacent to the Yakhchal during the clear, frigid winter nights. The desert sky, devoid of moisture, acts as a massive heat sink. Under these conditions, the water would radiate its heat away so efficiently that it could freeze solid, even if the ambient air temperature was slightly above freezing. Workers would harvest this ice at dawn, breaking it into blocks and hauling it down into the pit. Once stored, the thick insulating walls and the continual downdraft of cool, dry air from the wind catchers created a stable, frozen environment. Evaporative cooling played a role as well, as any moisture seeping into the porous walls would evaporate, drawing further heat from the interior. The system was so effective that ice could remain for over a year, a priceless commodity used to preserve food, chill desserts, and provide relief in the relentless heat. Today, architects and engineers combating climate change are looking back at structures like the Yakhchal with renewed reverence. They represent a pinnacle of zero-energy climate control, a building that works in concert with its environment rather than fighting it at tremendous electrical cost. The principles are being adapted into modern sustainable design, inspiring features like earth-sheltered construction, nocturnal radiation cooling, and sophisticated thermal mass strategies that stabilize indoor temperatures without air conditioning. The Yakhchal whispers a powerful, urgent question to our energy-hungry world. We have become masters of forcing environments to our will, but at what ongoing cost? This ancient ice house challenges the very premise that comfort requires constant, active power. It suggests that true sophistication might lie not in overwhelming nature with brute force technology, but in listening to its rhythms and designing elegant, silent solutions that harness the quiet physics of night, shade, and earth. If a mud brick cone in the desert could create a permanent winter, what other forgotten dialogues with the elements could cool our cities, warm our homes, and sustain our future without a single watt of generated power? The silent physics of the ice house preserved comfort in a desert, but in the shadow of a volcano, another kind of preservation offers a far more intimate glimpse into ancient expertise. In the ruins of Pompeii, sealed by ash in 79 CE, archaeologists uncovered not just a city frozen in time, but a complete medical toolkit. Laying out these instruments today is a startling experience. Here are slender bronze scalpels with interchangeable steel blades, their edges still keen. There are finely toothed bone saws, delicate hooks for manipulating tissues, and intricate uterine speculums with screw mechanisms to adjust their width. This is not a collection of primitive tools. It is a surgeon's kit, one that would look perfectly at home in a 19th century operating theater, and whose core principles remain recognizable to a modern surgeon. The sophistication is in the details. The Romans understood the need for specialized instruments for specialized tasks. A tool called a dioptra was used for cataract surgery, a delicate spoon-like instrument for displacing the clouded lens. Trephination drills, used to relieve pressure on the brain by removing a small piece of skull, had central pins to prevent the blade from slipping and damaging the delicate tissues beneath. Bone forceps were designed with specific curvatures to grasp and extract fragments cleanly. These were not instruments of last resort, but tools of a practiced, systematic craft. Crucially, they were made from bronze and iron, metals that could be repeatedly sterilized by boiling or heating, indicating a clear, if not fully microbial, understanding of hygiene and the prevention of infection. The rediscovery of these kits forced a dramatic re-evaluation of Roman medicine. For a long time, popular imagination painted ancient healing as a mix of herbal lore and desperate superstition. Pompeii's silent testimony reveals a different reality, one of highly developed surgical intervention, anatomical knowledge gained from dissection, and a professional class of physicians who valued precision and clean technique. Modern surgical instrument design did not emerge from a vacuum. The historical lineage of tools like the speculum or the bone curette can be traced directly back to these Roman prototypes. Their ergonomic shapes, the balance between a handle and a working end, were solutions to physical problems that have not changed. A scalpel must be sharp and controllable. A forceps must grip without crushing. The Romans arrived at elegant, enduring answers. This legacy of practical innovation forces a haunting question. The fall of the Roman Empire and the fragmentation of its knowledge led to a long period where such sophisticated tools and techniques largely vanished from Europe. The intricate speculum gave way to more rudimentary methods for centuries. So we must ask, what other refined medical knowledge, what nuanced understandings of anatomy or surgical procedure were lost in the turbulent transition between empires? What healing arts perfected over generations of Roman practice faded into obscurity, only to be painfully rediscovered a millennium later? The quiet bronze tools from Pompeii are more than artifacts. They are silent witnesses to a peak of practical science that once was, and a sobering reminder of how fragile the chain of knowledge can truly be. A surgeon's bronze scalpel speaks of knowledge applied with deliberate precision, but sometimes the most profound understanding is achieved without any understanding at all. In a quiet gallery of the British Museum rests a small, deep green glass cup from the 4th century. It depicts a scene from mythology, the doomed King Lycurgus entangled by vines. In ordinary reflected light, it is a beautiful, jade-colored artifact, but hold it up to a light source, let the beam pass through the glass, and a miracle occurs. The entire cup transforms, glowing with an unearthly, vibrant shade of ruby red. For over a millennium, this color-shifting magic was a complete mystery, a trick of the light that seemed to defy the laws of nature. The secret of the Lycurgus cup was not unlocked until the late 20th century, when scientists could finally peer into the glass itself at a scale invisible to the human eye. What they discovered was not a uniform material, but a sea of infinitesimal particles, a cosmic dust suspended in the Roman glass. These were nanoparticles of gold and silver, each 1,000th of times smaller than the width of a human hair. Their presence was no accident of impurities. The analysis revealed a specific ratio, roughly 7 parts silver to 3 parts gold, a mixture too precise to be mere chance. The ancient glassmakers had added a minute, calculated amount of precious metal dust to their molten silica. During the firing and cooling process, this dust diffused, forming a colloidal suspension of these tiny metal flecks. The physics behind the color change is a dance of light and scale. When light hits these embedded nanoparticles, the electrons on their surface begin to oscillate in resonance. This phenomenon, called surface plasmon resonance, scatters the light in a very specific way. The size and composition of the particles determine which wavelengths are absorbed and which are transmitted. The particles in the Lycurgus cup are tuned to absorb green and blue light in transmitted light, allowing the rich red to pass through, while in reflected light, they scatter the green, giving the cup its opaque emerald appearance. This means the Roman artisans 1600 years ago had mastered a form of nanotechnology. They were manipulating matter at a scale of billionths of a meter, not through knowledge of atoms, but through generations of meticulous, hands-on experimentation with recipes and furnace temperatures. They had a formula that worked, a process that yielded this magical dichroic glass, and they replicated it. The cup is not a singular fluke. Other fragments of similar glass have been found. This was a controlled, repeatable technology, even if the why remained a beautiful mystery to its creators. Today, this ancient principle is the foundation of cutting-edge science. Modern researchers are using the same concept of surface plasmon resonance in gold nanoparticles for medical diagnostics, creating ultra-sensitive tests that can detect a single virus particle. Others are developing smart windows that can change their tint based on light or heat, and advanced security inks that shift color under different angles. The Lycurgus cup thus exists in a fascinating paradox. It is both a masterpiece of intentional craft and a staggering accident of science. The artisans knew how to make it, but they could not possibly have known what they were making at the atomic level. This forces a humbling and thrilling question upon us. How many other ancient artifacts in museum cases around the world contain similar hidden marvels? How many vases, beads, swords, or pigments were created through processes that inadvertently engineered materials at the nanoscale, their true genius waiting silently for a future generation with the tools to finally see it? The Lycurgus cup shimmered with hidden nanoparticles, a secret locked in its glass for centuries, but in the heart of Delhi, a different kind of defiance stands in plain sight. It is a solid iron column over 23 feet tall, erected around the year 400 CE. For more than 1,600 years, it has endured the monsoon rains, the scorching heat, and the humid air of the Indian subcontinent. And yet, its surface remains smooth, with only the faintest patina of age, not a single flake of the destructive rust that should have consumed it long ago. This is the iron pillar of Delhi, and for generations, its resilience was considered a miracle, a metallurgical impossibility. Modern science has now deciphered its quiet secret, and the answer is a masterpiece of ancient materials engineering. When researchers finally analyzed a tiny sample, they discovered something remarkable about its composition. The iron itself was incredibly pure, with a very low carbon content, making it almost wrought iron. But the key was an unusually high level of phosphorus, over 1%, and an almost complete absence of sulfur and manganese. This specific chemistry was not the result of a sophisticated alloy recipe deliberately added by a smith. It was a gift of the local earth. The iron ore used, likely sourced from specific mines, naturally contained these properties. The ancient forging process then played the final, crucial role. The pillar was not cast, but painstakingly hammer-welded from large lumps of hot iron, a technique that further distributed these elements. Over centuries, the phosphorus, interacting with the iron and oxygen, fostered the growth of an exceptionally thin, even, and stable protective film on the pillar's surface, a compound called mesowite. This film is only a few hundred microns thick, but it is incredibly adherent and non-porous. When moisture hits it, the film does not allow the electrochemical reactions that cause common rust to take hold. Instead, it acts as a permanent, self-renewing barrier, a shield forged by time itself. The pillar's longevity is thus a perfect storm of fortunate geology and masterful craftsmanship. The workers did not understand the electrochemistry, but their choice of ore and their flawless forging technique created the precise conditions for this passive protection to form. Today, this ancient artifact is a cornerstone of modern corrosion science. Studying the mesowite layer has provided vital clues for developing new, long-lasting protective coatings for steel bridges, ship hulls, and pipelines, especially in the challenging, humid environments where rust is a constant, costly battle. The pillar stands not as a monument to a lost, magical formula, but to a profound, accidental harmony between human skill and the specific character of the natural world. It whispers a tantalizing question to every engineer who studies it. If one pillar, born from one unique combination of ore and craft, could achieve such timeless endurance, how many other localized, forgotten anti-corrosion techniques existed? Did other cultures, using different ores and different methods, discover their own ways to make peace with the relentless appetite of the elements, their secrets now buried with the last smith who knew the feel of that particular fire? That iron pillar achieved its timelessness through a perfect local chemistry, but to create a new metal, an alloy, requires a different kind of mastery, one that commands a volatile element. In the workshops of Ming Dynasty China, alchemists and metallurgists confronted a frustrating puzzle. They knew of a metal that could give a golden hue to copper, creating brass, a material prized for coins, tools, and ritual objects. This metal was zinc, yet zinc is a trickster. It does not melt and flow like iron or copper. Instead, it vaporizes at a temperature well below its melting point, turning into a useless, invisible fume that escapes from a traditional smelting furnace. Capturing this fleeting metal seemed almost like alchemy, a transmutation of vapor into solid matter. The Chinese solution, perfected by the 16th century, was a triumph of chemical engineering. They designed a specialized sealed crucible shaped like an inverted bottle. At the bottom, they placed a mixture of zinc ore and charcoal. A condenser, often a tube or a chamber, led downward from the heated zone. As the crucible was heated in a furnace, the zinc would vaporize, but instead of being lost, the vapors were channeled downward into the cooler condenser. There, they would solidify into metallic zinc, which could be collected. This downward distillation process was counterintuitive, as heat naturally rises, but it was brilliantly effective. It required precise control of temperature and an airtight seal to prevent oxidation, a level of technical sophistication documented in detailed manuals of the time. This systematic knowledge allowed for the reliable production of brass on an industrial scale for centuries. Then the knowledge faded, perhaps guarded as a state secret or lost in dynastic transitions. When European chemists in the 18th century began their own frantic search for a method to produce zinc, they struggled for decades, eventually arriving at a nearly identical downward distillation process, completely unaware that Chinese craftsmen had solved the same puzzle hundreds of years earlier. This parallel discovery highlights a profound truth about technological progress. It is not always a linear relay race. Sometimes it is a series of isolated lamps being lit in different rooms of history, their light extinguished and then painfully relit. The Chinese mastery of zinc distillation forces us to look at the foundations of our own industrial world with new eyes. How many other core processes, from glassmaking to dye production, have ancient pedigrees that stretch back into forgotten technical libraries, their origins obscured by the assumption that such complexity is a purely modern achievement? A sealed sphere hisses and begins to rotate, a simple demonstration of power in a temple courtyard. This was the Aeolipile, crafted by the engineer hero of Alexandria in the 1st century. It was an elegant device, a hollow metal ball mounted on a boiler. As the water boiled, steam rushed through pipes into the sphere, escaping from two bent nozzles on opposite sides. The reactive force of the escaping jets caused the sphere to spin, a whirling dance of metal and vapor. It was, in every practical sense, the world's first steam turbine. Yet for all its brilliance, the Aeolipile never turned a millstone, never pumped water from a mine, never propelled a vehicle. It remained a temple wonder, a philosophical toy to illustrate the principles of air and motion, a curiosity for the educated elite. Its potential to transform the physical world was seen but never seized. The rediscovery of heroes' writings during the Renaissance provided a crucial spark. Engineers like Giovanni Branca in the 17th century studied the principle, and the intellectual lineage can be traced directly to the massive beam engines that would later drive the Industrial Revolution. The Aeolipile thus stands as one of history's most poignant what-if moments. The basic technology for steam power existed, fully demonstrated, 1700 years before James Watt improved the Newcomen engine. So why did that earlier age of innovation not ignite an industrial revolution of its own? The answer lies not in a lack of intelligence, but in a constellation of social and economic conditions. The ancient Mediterranean world, for all its grandeur, was built on a foundation of abundant slave labor. There was little economic pressure to develop labor-saving machinery on a massive scale. The cultural mindset saw engineering marvels as expressions of divine wonder or philosophical truth, not as tools for systematic production. The Aeolipile was a brilliant answer to a question its society was not yet asking. This disconnect forces us to reconsider what true innovation requires. It is not merely the flash of a clever idea, but the fertile ground of need, incentive, and vision to apply it. The steam turbine had to wait for a world that saw steam not as a wonder but as a worker. This historical pause whispers a challenging question about our own era. What brilliant, transformative technologies do we possess today that we treat as mere curiosities or toys, simply because our economic structures or cultural priorities have not yet aligned to see their world-changing potential? The steam turbine remained a temple curiosity, a potential unrealized by its own society's needs. But in a land where the absence of water meant the absence of life itself, innovation was not a philosophical luxury, it was an absolute necessity. Look across the sun-scorched plains of southern Peru, a landscape so dry it seems to defy human habitation. Here, the famous Nazca lines etch their giant mysteries upon the desert floor. Yet scattered among those enigmatic drawings is another, more vital kind of line. These are the puquios, appearing as curious spirals of stone descending into the earth. They are not art, but the mouths of an ancient breathing machine. The Nazca did not just draw on their desert, they engineered a conversation with it, building a hidden network of subterranean aqueducts to pull life from the stone. The design was a masterpiece of practical hydrology. Workers first located underground water tables, often fed by distant Andean snowmelt seeping through the gravel subsoil. Then they excavated deep, horizontal canals, tunneling through the earth at a gentle slope to let gravity guide the water. The puquios themselves are the ingenious ventilation shafts. Spaced at regular intervals along the canal's path, these spiraling stone funnels served a dual purpose. They provided access for maintenance, allowing workers to descend and clear silt or debris. More importantly, they acted as wind intakes. As air flowed down the shaft and across the surface of the water in the tunnel below, it created a pressure differential that actually helped pull the water along, increasing the flow and preventing stagnation in the still, dark channels. This was a self-regulating system, using the desert's own winds to sustain its hidden rivers. The knowledge required was immense. It meant understanding groundwater geology, precise surveying over long distances to maintain the correct gradient, and a communal commitment to upkeep that spanned generations. The result transformed the impossible. In one of the most arid regions on the planet, the Nazca culture flourished for centuries, supporting agriculture and permanent settlements not along a river, but above a labyrinth of their own creation. The most profound testament to their genius is not in the past but in the present. Many of these aqueducts are still in use today, maintained and relied upon by local farmers. Modern hydrologists study them not as ruins, but as living models of sustainable water management. In an era of deepening droughts and over-pumped aquifers, the Puquios offer a quiet lesson in resilience. They show a system designed for renewal, one that harvests water without depleting the source, that works with the landscape's natural physics rather than against it. This ancient network whispers a crucial question to our climate-stressed world. We often reach for monumental, energy-intensive solutions, like massive desalination plants or cross-continental pipelines. But what if the blueprint for water security in many regions is not about conquering nature with bigger pumps, but about listening to it with smarter, humbler tunnels? The Nazca looked at a trackless desert and saw not a barren end, but a hidden map of veins waiting to be connected, a lesson in finding abundance not by demanding more from the world, but by understanding more deeply how it already works. The desert aqueducts of the Nazca were a lifeline woven into the earth itself, a technology of survival. But in the frozen north, another culture forged a technology of conquest from a material that seemed to defy the very limits of their world. For a Viking warrior, the ultimate symbol of status, skill, and divine favor was not just any sword, but one marked with a name, inscribed in iron letters along the blade, a declaration of origin and quality, Ulfberht. This was not a maker's signature in the simple sense. It was a brand, a guarantee of lethal perfection. In a time when most European blades were pattern-welded from strips of softer iron and higher carbon steel, folded and twisted to create a serviceable edge, the Ulfberht was something entirely different. It was a ghost of darker metal, lighter, stronger, and frighteningly flexible. Contemporary sagas speak of these swords bending almost to a circle in battle before snapping back to true, while lesser blades would shatter or hold a fatal curve. For centuries, the secret of the Ulfberht was buried with the Norse smiths. The inscription was known, but the material science behind it was a complete mystery, a peak of craftsmanship lost to the so-called Dark Ages. Modern metallurgists, using X-rays and spectroscopic analysis on the few dozen genuine specimens, have finally decoded its superiority. The answer lay in its purity. An Ulfberht blade was made from crucible steel, a single, homogeneous piece of metal with a remarkably high and even carbon content, around 1.5%. This is a grade known as hypereutectoid steel, a material that rivals the quality of modern high-carbon tool steel. The manufacturing process was as advanced as the material. To achieve this purity, the raw iron had to be melted at an extremely high temperature, far beyond what a typical Norse forge could produce. This liquefied the metal, allowing the slag impurities, the rocky inclusions that weaken a blade, to rise to the surface where they could be skimmed off. The result was a clean, uniform ingot of steel, free of the flaws that plagued contemporary weapons. This technology was simply not present in early medieval Europe. It was a process perfected thousands of miles away, in the Islamic world of Central Asia and the Middle East, where furnaces could reach the necessary temperatures. The Ulfberht swords, therefore, are not just weapons. They are physical proof of a vast and sophisticated trade network that connected the fjords of Norway to the workshops of Persia. The raw material, likely in the form of prized ingots called wootz steel from modern-day Afghanistan or India, traveled along the river routes of Eastern Europe through the hands of ruse traders to finally reach the forges of the Rhineland, where Frankish smiths working for Norse patrons forged them into legendary blades. This journey rewrites our understanding of the Viking Age. It was not an era of isolated raiders, but of connected merchants and consumers with access to a globalized market for high technology. The smith who hammered an Ulfberht blade possessed specialized knowledge, understanding how to work this exotic steel without ruining its delicate carbon structure through overheating. The existence of these swords presents a staggering historical puzzle. This method of creating pure, homogeneous steel vanished from Europe after the Ulfberht workshops ceased production around the year 1000. The knowledge was lost, and European sword-making reverted to older, less perfect methods for centuries. It would not be until the innovations of the Industrial Revolution, nearly 800 years later, that consistent, high-quality crucible steel would be produced again on the continent. So we are left with a haunting gap. For a brief window of time, a few generations, a trickle of transcendent technology flowed from the east into the hands of northern warriors. Then the window slammed shut, and the knowledge retreated into legend. How many other such windows opened and closed in the ancient world, allowing a flash of advanced understanding to cross continents before the routes faded, the masters died, and the secret was swallowed again by time. The Ulfberht sword was a ghost of perfect steel, a fleeting whisper of a global network, but another whisper, far older, suggests an intellectual network of a different kind, one that built universes inside bronze boxes. The Antikythera Mechanism was not a solitary miracle. It was likely a brilliant peak within a broader mountain range of Greek mechanical thought, now almost entirely eroded by time. Scattered through ancient texts are fleeting references to other wonders. The great inventor Archimedes, we are told, constructed a mechanical planetarium so precise it could show the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 known planets along with their eclipses. Cicero wrote of a similar device brought to Rome by the general Marcellus, a sphere that modeled the celestial dance with such accuracy it seemed to capture the very laws of the heavens in bronze and gearwork. These were not simple teaching aids. They were analog computers, physical embodiments of complex mathematical theories. To build them required a profound fusion of disciplines. Astronomers like Hipparchus, with his theories on the irregular orbits of celestial bodies, had to collaborate directly with master artisans capable of translating those subtle equations into the precise dimensions of interlocking gear teeth. Each gear ratio was a frozen piece of calculus, a mechanical solution to a problem of predictive astronomy. This implies the existence of a sophisticated school of engineering, a tradition where the workshop and the library were intimately connected. The goal was not utility in a mundane sense, but understanding, a desire to hold a working model of cosmic order in one's hands. The eventual fading of this tradition is one of history's great intellectual losses. The knowledge required to design such devices, the specific geometries and metallurgical techniques, vanished for centuries, yet the conceptual spark never fully died. It traveled, transformed, scholars in the medieval Islamic world, preserving and expanding upon Greek texts, developed intricate water clocks and geared astrolabes. These ideas eventually filtered into medieval Europe, finding expression in the monumental astronomical clocks of cathedrals, like those in Prague and Strasbourg, which used complex gear trains to display celestial information. The lineage is indirect but undeniable. The Antikythera Mechanism and its lost cousins were the conceptual ancestors of all mechanical computers, proving that the impulse to simulate reality with machinery is ancient. This realization casts a long shadow over our view of the past. We have one miraculous survivor from a shipwreck. How many others rested in the libraries of Alexandria or the private studies of Roman nobles, only to be melted down for their bronze or left to crumble into unidentifiable dust? The silence of the archaeological record is not a statement of absence, but a challenge. It asks us to read between the lines of history, to understand that the most fragile technologies are often those of pure intellect, leaving behind whispers in texts where we wish for the thunder of gears. The legacy of the Ulfberht sword was forged in fire and trade, a testament to connections across continents. Yet the true backbone of an empire was not carried in a warrior's hand, but laid beneath his feet. Walk on a stretch of Roman road, still firm and true after 2,000 years, and you are traversing a masterpiece of civil engineering. Its endurance is no accident of sturdy stone, but the result of a deliberate, layered construction process so sophisticated it remains the foundational principle of modern road building. The Romans did not simply pave a path, they engineered a permanent artery. The process began with the excavation of a wide, deep trench, meticulously leveled. Into this trench, workers laid the statumen, a foundation of large, hand-placed stones. This was not a random fill. It was a deliberate base designed to stabilize the roadbed and facilitate drainage, preventing the soft earth below from swallowing the structure. Upon this sturdy base came the rudus, a thick layer of smaller rubble and broken pottery bound with cement, forming a firm, load-distributing platform. Next, the nucleus, a core of concrete or fine gravel mixed with lime, created a smooth, solid surface for the final layer. And finally, the crowning glory, the summum dorsum, interlocking paving stones of hard basalt or granite, carefully fitted together and cambered, meaning slightly curved, to shed rainwater efficiently into roadside ditches. This was not a single material, but a composite system, each layer performing a specific function, from drainage and load-bearing to providing a smooth, durable traveling surface. The entire road was a machine for conquering distance and time, allowing legions to march at unprecedented speed and enabling goods, ideas, and culture to flow across 3 continents. Modern civil engineers, when they build a highway, follow an almost identical philosophical blueprint, a base layer of compacted subsoil, followed by layers of aggregate, bound material, and finally a surface of asphalt or concrete. The materials have changed, but the layered, load-bearing principle is a direct echo of Roman empirical genius. They understood geotechnical engineering not through formulas, but through an intuitive, hard-won grasp of how materials interact with earth and water under stress. Their roads outlasted temples and palaces, many still tracing the landscapes of Europe and North Africa today. This longevity poses a quiet, profound question for our own era of rapid construction and planned obsolescence. How much of what we consider modern engineering innovation is not a new discovery at all, but a slow, scientific rediscovery of principles that ancient builders mastered through observation, trial, and a vision of infrastructure built not for a decade, but for a millennium? While Roman roads conquered earthly distances, Chinese astronomers charted a map of the heavens across centuries. Their technology was not forged from bronze or stone, but from ink, paper, and an unbroken line of human attention. Gaze upon one of these ancient star charts, and you are not simply looking at a drawing, you are witnessing a timeline. For over 2,000 years, court astronomers maintained a meticulous, state-sponsored vigil of the night sky. Every unusual event was noted with bureaucratic precision: the date, the position, the duration, and the appearance. A guest star, as they called it, that blazed unexpectedly in the constellation Taurus in the year 1054. A new dark blemish moving across the face of the sun. A sweeping broom star, its tail pointing away from the sun, appearing with startling regularity. These were not just poetic observations, they were empirical data points entered into an imperial archive that functioned as a celestial database. This institutionalized program of observation yielded a treasure that modern astrophysics could never create in a laboratory. A continuous record of cosmic behavior spanning dozens of human generations. When 20th century astronomers began studying the remnants of stellar explosions, they turned to these Chinese records to anchor their theories in time. That guest star from 1054 was the supernova that created the Crab Nebula, a swirling cloud of gas and dust still expanding today. The Chinese description of its position and its visibility in daylight for 23 days provided the exact date and luminosity, allowing scientists to calculate the expansion rate and verify models of stellar life cycles. Their sunspot records, noting periods of low solar activity like the Maunder minimum in the 17th century, have become crucial evidence for understanding the long-term cycles of our own star and its influence on Earth's climate. The true technological marvel was this system itself, a vast, enduring project of information management. It required standardized terminology, reliable methods of timekeeping, and a corps of trained specialists whose sole duty was to watch and record, free from the superstitions that often colored similar observations elsewhere. This allowed for breathtakingly practical applications. By tracking the predictable motions of the moon and sun against this fixed stellar background, Chinese astronomers could forecast eclipses with remarkable accuracy, a power that reinforced the emperor's mandate to rule in harmony with the cosmos. It also led to the creation of increasingly precise calendars, essential for agriculture, taxation, and the rhythm of an entire civilization. In our current age of big data and satellite telescopes, we have come to appreciate the profound power of this ancient approach. The greatest insights into slow cosmic processes, the ones that unfold over centuries or millennia, can only be gleaned from records that are equally long. The Chinese archives represent a kind of temporal technology, a way to stretch the scientific gaze far beyond a single human lifetime. This legacy now poses a thrilling and urgent question for historians of science. Countless scrolls and manuscripts from cultures around the world remain untranslated or unstudied, sitting in library vaults and museum storage rooms. Within those fragile pages, might there be observations of a rare comet's path, a detailed account of an aurora, or notes on a variable star that dimmed and brightened, waiting to complete a data set that began 1,000 years ago? What other cosmic mysteries or even warnings about our own planet's changes are inscribed in ink, patiently awaiting a reader from the future to understand their full meaning? The star charts of China built a bridge of knowledge across centuries, a testament to what endures when observation is woven into the fabric of a civilization. But there is another kind of endurance, one that flows not through archives but through the very foundations of a city. Step through a doorway in the palace of Knossos on the island of Crete, a structure dating back over 4,000 years. You might expect the rough, utilitarian spaces of a Bronze Age fortress. Instead, you encounter a quiet marvel of daily life. In a small chamber, a wooden seat is mounted over a carefully carved terracotta conduit. A nearby cistern holds water, and a simple lever mechanism suggests it could be tipped to flush waste away through the pipe. This is not a medieval garderobe or a Roman latrine built millennia later. This is a Minoan flushing toilet, a functioning part of a vast hidden network that made this palace one of the most advanced urban environments of the ancient world. The genius of Knossos was not in any single room, but in what lay beneath the vibrant frescoes and grand courtyards. The Minoans engineered a sophisticated, dual system for managing water. For fresh water, they laid interlocking terracotta pipes, tapered so they fit snugly together, preventing leaks and maintaining pressure as they channeled spring water from the surrounding hills into the palace's baths, fountains, and cisterns. For waste, they constructed a separate stone-lined sewer system. These were not just open ditches, they were carefully graded tunnels, built with a precise slope so gravity would carry everything away from the living quarters, likely out to agricultural fields or distant pits. At key junctions, they built sedimentation tanks, basins where water would slow down, allowing heavier solids to settle out before the cleaner liquid continued on its path. This separation of clean and dirty water, this understanding of gradient and filtration, represents a profound grasp of public health engineering. It created a standard of urban sanitation and comfort that would not be seen again in Europe on such a scale until the great public works projects of the 19th century. Then, around the year 1400 before the Common Era, the system fell silent. The intricate network of pipes filled with dust, the knowledge of how to build and maintain it vanished with the civilization that created it. The collapse of the Minoan world, likely due to a catastrophic combination of natural disasters, invasions, and social upheaval, did more than topple palaces. It severed a vital thread of practical knowledge. For over 3,000 years, the principles of integrated urban sanitation that the Minoans took for granted were largely absent from the Western world. Later civilizations, including the Greeks and Romans, would develop their own impressive aqueducts and public baths, but the concept of a coordinated, city-wide system separating fresh water from waste in every dwelling was a forgotten art. The rediscovery of this plumbing by archaeologists in the early 20th century was a shock to the historical timeline. It forced a humbling revision. We had assumed that such complex infrastructure was a hallmark of later, supposedly more advanced classical empires. Yet here, in a pre-classical society on a Mediterranean island, was evidence of a civilization that prioritized public health and hydraulic engineering to an astonishing degree. This single palace toilet, seemingly a mundane object, challenges the comforting, linear narrative of progress. It proves that technological sophistication is not a steady, upward climb. It can be a flickering light, brilliant in one era, extinguished by chaos, and then painstakingly relit millennia later. This loss forces a difficult, essential question upon us. What factors cause such profound, life-improving knowledge to simply disappear? The Minoan example suggests it is rarely a single cause. It is a perfect storm where the guardians of that knowledge, the specialized engineers and artisans, are scattered or lost. Where the social and economic structures that funded and demanded such complex systems break down entirely. Where surviving communities, focused on immediate survival, no longer have the resources or the collective memory to maintain the intricate networks of their ancestors. The pipes crack, the tanks fill with silt, and within a few generations, the very purpose of those strange tunnels in the ground becomes a mystery, then a myth. The story of Knossos is a powerful reminder that our own technological world, for all its global connections and digital backups, is not immune to such forgetting. It asks us to consider what essential systems we rely on today, and what it would take for their underlying principles to fade from human understanding, waiting for some future explorer to puzzle over the ruins of our own silent networks. The silent pipes of Knossos remind us that entire systems of knowledge can vanish when the society that sustains them falls. But there is a technology that requires no pipes, no gears, no bronze at all, yet it sculpted an entire continent for longer than recorded history. From the air, the Australian landscape can appear as a vast mosaic, a patchwork of different aged vegetation. For tens of thousands of years, this was not a random pattern. It was a cultivated garden, meticulously maintained with the most elemental of tools, fire. Indigenous Australians practiced what is now called firestick farming, a term that barely captures its profound sophistication. This was not wildfire. It was a precise, seasonal, and deeply knowledgeable application of low-intensity, cool burning flames. Elders, reading the land like a living text, would set small, controlled fires when certain plants seeded, when the wind was right, and when the moisture in the air and vegetation was perfect. The flames would creep slowly, clearing the dry undergrowth but leaving the tall, mature trees unharmed. To an outsider centuries ago, this might have looked like simple burning. We now understand it was one of the most advanced and sustainable landscape management technologies ever developed. the purposes were multifaceted and brilliant. By regularly clearing the thick underbrush, these controlled burns prevented the buildup of massive fuel loads that could lead to the catastrophic, uncontrollable wildfires we see today. They encouraged the growth of fresh, tender shoots that attracted kangaroos and other game, making hunting more productive and predictable. The ash from the burns acted as a nutrient recycler, fertilizing the soil and prompting the germination of certain plant species that relied on the heat of a fire to crack their seed coats. Over millennia, this practice didn't just manage the ecosystem, it actively designed it, promoting biodiversity in a specific, beneficial pattern and creating a mosaic of habitats that supported a wider range of life. This was a technology of profound patience and observation, a knowledge system passed down through countless generations, encoded in song lines and ceremony. It was a dialogue with the land, a way of listening and responding that maintained balance. For a long time, European settlers, with their different agricultural paradigm, saw this burning as wasteful or primitive, and they suppressed it. The consequence was a landscape thrown out of its ancient rhythm, leading to denser, more dangerous fuel loads and a loss of biodiversity. Only in recent decades have modern ecologists and land managers, facing increasingly severe fire seasons, begun to relearn what was never truly lost. They are collaborating with indigenous knowledge holders to reintroduce controlled cultural burning, not as a novel idea, but as a vital, time-tested science. This recognition is a seismic shift in perspective. It moves fire from the category of a destructive force to be suppressed, to a tool of renewal to be carefully wielded. It proves that the highest form of engineering might not be about building structures upon the land, but about understanding the land's own processes so intimately that you can guide them toward mutual flourishing. The quiet lesson of firestick farming echoes far beyond Australia. It asks us, in an age of climate crisis and environmental degradation, to look humbly at other indigenous knowledge systems. How many other cultures developed similarly elegant, place-based technologies for managing forests, grasslands, or coastlines? What deep understandings of floodplains, animal migration, or soil health are held within communities whose wisdom we have historically overlooked or dismissed? This ancient practice, written not in stone but in the very pattern of the living earth, suggests that some of the most advanced blueprints for a sustainable future are not in our laboratories, but in traditions that have kept the flame of knowledge alive for 1,000 generations. This final artifact offers no gleaming bronze or self-healing concrete. It is a simple, baked clay disc, small enough to fit in your palm. Discovered in the Minoan Palace of Phaistos on Crete, it is imprinted with a silent storm of symbols, 241 of them, spiraling inward from the edge like a locked labyrinth. Each symbol is not drawn by hand but pressed into the clay with a stamp, a carved seal. A man, a woman, a ship, a shield, a beehive, a walking bird, all repeated in a precise, deliberate sequence. This is the Phaistos disc, and it is a different kind of technology altogether, a machine for language. In a world of handwritten scripts, this object represents something radical, the principle of movable type. Someone, over 3,000 years before Gutenberg, carved a set of individual symbol stamps so that a message could be replicated, stamped again and again with perfect consistency onto wet clay. This was not mass production in the industrial sense, but it was a profound step toward the standardization of information, a physical encoding meant to be read, perhaps by many, in exactly the same way. And yet, for all the clarity of its manufacture, its meaning is a perfect void. The script it uses is unique, appearing nowhere else in the Minoan world. It is not Linear A or Linear B, the other known scripts of Crete. It is a solitary utterance, a single page from a book whose language, author, and title are all unknown. Is it a religious hymn, a legal treaty, a royal proclamation, or an elaborate accounting list? The symbols tantalize with their familiarity, but their arrangement defies every attempt at translation. For over a century, the disk has been a siren song for linguists and amateur codebreakers alike, generating countless proposed decipherments that contradict each other completely. Its mystery is a stark reminder that a technology can be perfectly preserved and yet remain utterly opaque. We can see the how with crystalline clarity. The method of its creation speaks of administrative innovation and a desire for permanence. But the why, the living voice behind those stamped figures, has been swallowed by time. This is where our journey through rediscovered technologies reaches its most profound and humbling frontier. We have seen gears that model the cosmos and concrete that heals its own wounds, achievements we can reverse engineer and understand. The Phaistos disk represents the opposite, a complete system whose logic is just beyond our grasp. It sits in a museum case, a complete sentence in a language of one. Today, this ancient puzzle is meeting a new kind of key. Computational linguists and artificial intelligence systems are being trained on the disk's patterns, analyzing the frequency and sequences of symbols with a speed and depth no human scholar could match. These algorithms do not guess, they calculate probabilities, searching for linguistic structures hidden in the spiral. They might one day identify it as a syllabic script, a logographic system, or something entirely unexpected. The hope is that machine learning, fed with every known writing system from antiquity, might finally detect a faint structural echo, a familial resemblance in the data that points the way forward. The disk, therefore, bridges our past and our future in a unique way. It is a 3,000-year-old challenge issued to our most modern tools. Its ultimate rediscovery may not be of a lost machine or material, but of a lost voice. It asks us the final, lingering question that hangs over every artifact we have explored. How many other breakthroughs, not of engineering, but of thought, of poetry, of law, or of belief, are physically present in the archaeological record, waiting not for a better shovel, but for a better key? The disk's silent spiral is a metaphor for our entire quest. We have spent this time unraveling mysteries, finding answers in bronze and iron and ash. But some ancient technologies are not just waiting to be found, they are waiting to be heard, and the key to hearing them may not lie in the past we dig up, but in the future we are building, one algorithm, one insight, one curious mind at a time. These scattered discoveries form a constellation, and when we step back, the pattern they trace is more illuminating than any single star. A powerful set of common threads weaves through these 25 ancient technologies, revealing a shared blueprint for innovation that feels startlingly relevant. At its heart lies a profound and patient observation of the natural world. The Viking navigator did not invent the polarization of sunlight, he learned to read it with a crystal. The Roman concrete engineer did not create self-healing chemistry, he harnessed a reaction already present in volcanic ash and seawater. The Australian firekeepers did not impose their will on the landscape. They listened to its cycles and guided them with a cool, intentional flame. This was not technology as a force of domination, but as a form of deep literacy, a dialogue with the materials and processes already at hand. This dialogue naturally led to a second principle, sustainability through local intelligence. The Maya bioconcrete incorporated tree sap from the surrounding jungle. The Persian Yakhchal used the desert's own cold nights and dry winds to create ice. The Delhi iron pillar's legendary rust resistance emerged from the unique chemistry of local ore. These were not universal solutions shipped across continents, but hyper-local adaptations born from an intimate knowledge of place. They used what was abundant, and in doing so, they often created systems that were inherently circular, renewing rather than depleting their environment. Their genius was in seeing potential where others saw limitation, transforming local constraints into enduring strengths. Furthermore, these breakthroughs consistently defy our modern categories of specialization. To build the Antikythera Mechanism required an astronomer who understood planetary motion, a mathematician who could translate orbits into gear ratios, and a metalsmith capable of crafting those gears with microscopic precision. It was a project that lived at the intersection of disciplines. Similarly, the Greek fire chemists had to understand volatile fluids, pressure dynamics, and delivery mechanics, a fusion of chemistry and mechanical engineering for a single, terrifying purpose. This integration of knowledge from different fields was not an exception. It was the engine of their most sophisticated creations. They did not see the world in separated silos of science, art, and craft. They saw it as an interconnected whole to be engaged with every available tool of the mind and hand. The impetus for these marvels was almost always rooted in urgent, practical necessity. The need to defend a city wall gave birth to the steam cannon and Greek fire. The need to feed a population in a desert spawned the Nazca aqueducts. The need to administer a vast empire without paper led to the knotted language of the Quipu. The need to ensure a building would last for generations inspired self-healing concrete. These were not abstract thought experiments conducted in isolation. They were answers to immediate questions of survival, governance, power, and legacy. This practical grounding gave the technologies their robust, elegant form, every element serving a clear purpose in the struggle to endure and thrive. Yet for all their brilliance, so many were lost. The reasons for this forgetting are a sobering lesson in the fragility of knowledge itself. Sometimes the end came with the collapse of the civilization that sustained it, as with the Minoan plumbing and perhaps the full art of the Antikythera gearwork. When palaces fall and populations scatter, the specialized artisans and the institutions that supported them vanish. In other cases, secrecy was the cause. The formula for Greek fire or the techniques of the Ulfberht smiths were guarded so closely that when the guilds or families that held them died out, the knowledge died with them. And often, especially with practices like firestick farming, the technology was embedded in oral tradition and lived practice, not written manuals. When cultural disruption severs that chain of teaching from elder to youth, the wisdom can fade within a generation, leaving only a changed landscape whose origins become a mystery. Our modern recovery of these secrets is itself a new kind of technology, a partnership across time. It is the archaeologist's trowel meeting the physicist's spectrometer. We are using tools our ancestors could never have conceived, computerized tomography scanners to peer inside corroded lumps, synchrotron radiation to analyze the molecular structure of 2,000-year-old ink, and algorithms to search for patterns in undeciphered scripts like the Phaistos disk. We are not just digging up artifacts, we are illuminating them with the light of our own most advanced science, creating a conversation between the deepest past and the furthest edge of the present. This collaborative detective work is revealing that our story of human ingenuity is not a straight, ascending line. It is more like a spiral or perhaps a vast, branching network. Ideas can blaze brightly in one era, fade into embers, and be reignited centuries later by minds working in a completely different context, often unaware they are walking a path first laid down long ago. This cyclical nature of discovery carries profound implications for our own future. The challenges we face, sustainable building, resilient infrastructure, harmonious land management, and efficient energy use, are not entirely new. Our ancestors grappled with versions of them, and in their local, observant, integrated way, they often found elegant solutions that worked for centuries. Their legacy is not a set of blueprints to copy directly, but a mindset to reclaim. It is a reminder to look closely at the natural world for clues, to value deep, localized knowledge, to break down the walls between disciplines, and to seek solutions that are in dialogue with their environment rather than at war with it. The past, once thought to be a record of primitive steps, is now revealing itself to be a repository of forgotten sophistication, a whisper across the centuries that the most advanced path forward might begin with learning to see the world once again with ancient eyes. From the delicate gears of a cosmic calculator to the invisible dance of nanoparticles in a Roman cup, this journey has revealed a past shimmering with quiet genius. These 25 rediscoveries are not merely artifacts in glass cases. They are conversations across time, each one challenging a comfortable assumption about our own place in history. They dismantle the myth of linear progress, replacing it with a far richer tapestry of ingenuity that flickered, faded, and is now being relit by the torch of modern science. This recovered legacy does more than inspire awe. It performs a vital, humbling service. It punctures our technological hubris, the unspoken belief that newer is inherently smarter. We look at a 2,000-year-old self-healing concrete and realize our own materials can be fragile by comparison. We study a desert ice house that needs no electricity and question our energy-hungry solutions. This is not a critique, but an invitation, a reminder to look at the problems of our present with a wider, more respectful gaze, one that includes the wisdom of those who solved similar challenges with the elegant tools of their own time. And that is where the past becomes powerfully practical. These ancient breakthroughs are actively inspiring new research, providing sustainable blueprints for our future. Material scientists are designing concrete that mimics Roman self-repair. Architects are modeling passive cooling systems on Persian wind catchers and ice houses. Ecologists are partnering with indigenous communities to relearn the ancient art of cultural burning to manage modern wildfires. The past is not a static museum. It is a living laboratory, offering tested principles for resilience, efficiency, and harmony with our environment. At its core, this exploration reaffirms a profound truth about humanity. Innovation is not a modern invention. It is a timeless trait, a spark that has flared again and again throughout our story, in every culture and under every sun. The drive to understand, to improve, to create solutions from the materials at hand, this is what connects the Minoan plumber, the Viking navigator, the Chinese astronomer, and the engineer in a Silicon Valley lab. We are all part of the same long conversation with the universe. The seeds of our next great breakthroughs may very well lie not in the uncharted future, but in the overlooked wisdom of the past, waiting for us to look back with new eyes and new tools. As our instruments grow more sensitive, as algorithms help us decipher lost languages and detect hidden structures, who can say what other marvels are waiting silently in the soil, in a manuscript, or in the very pattern of an ancient landscape? The story of human ingenuity is still being written, and some of its most thrilling chapters may be ones we thought were long closed. If this journey through forgotten brilliance has sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing for more explorations into the mysteries history has left behind. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these ancient technologies reshaped your view of the past the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, the past is not a graveyard of dead ideas. It is a vast, whispering library, and we have only just begun to learn how to read its pages.